How many of you were here last year? So a good number of you, and maybe you remember that I talked about a lawsuit in Nassau County in Mineola. Now, if you receive the Housing News, which is the newsletter, there are a couple of copies on your table. You know this already, but if you don't get that, I want to let you know the outcome from that lawsuit. We had a positive settlement, which is a good thing. The owner sold townhouse apartments in that housing discrimination lawsuit, sold the apartments. I guess he didn't like that we brought a lawsuit against him. So at least he is no longer able to discriminate against African Americans at that location. And just at the end of April in this year, we filed a lawsuit against Mayfair Garden, which is an apartment building complex in Comac in Smithtown. And at this point, not surprisingly, but still very unfortunately, the multiple acts of discrimination against African American fair housing testers in the Suffolk County discrimination case were quite similar to the one in Nassau County. The white testers were told about vacancies, were showed apartments, and in general were encouraged to apply for housing. The black testers were discouraged from renting. There was misrepresentation of the availability of the apartments. They were not shown apartments, and the dates the apartments would be available were misrepresented. So that is a new case. There isn't anything to report tonight on it, but we will keep you posted. And if we are successful, we will not only seek to cover our costs and damages, but we will seek the injunctive relief, which is very important because we don't want these bad actors to continue to do what they've been doing. So the injunctive relief that we would seek would require the defendants to undergo fair housing training, to alter their management practices and policies, and would permit Erase Racism to conduct a review and assessment of their records to assess their compliance with the settlement agreement. So the other thing I mentioned at last year's benefit was the civil rights complaint to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, presenting evidence that Nassau County discriminates against African Americans and perpetuates racial segregation in the administration of its housing and community development programs. And furthermore, the complaint identified violations committed by the county itself and the county's failure to enforce federal civil rights requirements or members of the Nassau Urban County Consortium. So I am pleased to report that HUD accepted this complaint and initiated an investigation. If HUD had thought that our complaint was frivolous or without merit, they would have rejected it and gone no further. I can report that the county and HUD and Erase Racism are now in settlement discussions. And as is customary, HUD has suspended its investigation pending the results of those conciliation discussions. So I don't have anything more to report on that because the content of those discussions is confidential. So I say this because I wanted to give you a sense of some very concrete things that we are doing, and also to say that if you're looking for a shiny new penny, Erase Racism isn't a shiny new penny. Erase Racism is sort of in the trenches every day, sticking with things, following through to the end, not just a flash in the pan, but we start an effort and we see it through. And so you don't always see an outcome immediately. But if you hang around long enough, you will find out that we've been able to pull some things off even though we only have a few people in the office. So, sometimes it seems like it's smoke and mirrors, and when I see mirrors around, it reminds me of that. People always talk about your departments as if, you know, back at the office there are these various departments. No, there's just one person who's the staff attorney, and there's one person who's the community organizer. And then I have about 5 jobs. So I really do urge you, if you do not receive the housing news, think about getting on our mailing list. And I'll take an opportunity to say that the only reason why we're able to print and to mail that is because we have sponsors. The Community Church of Syosset was a sponsor that paid for the printing and mailing of one edition. The edition that's on your table was supported in part by Citibank. So if you'd like to be a sponsor, let us know. We have been fortunate over the years to be supported by the Ford Foundation to support our housing work, and more recently our community organizing work. And last year I reported that we were in the process of evaluating candidates for a full-time position, to fill a full-time position of a community organizer. And as I mentioned, we now have a full-time person on staff ever since January. The theme of this year's benefit, Moving Forward Together, is really a reflection of our new organizing work. And as an example, I'd like to bring to your attention, there is a pamphlet on your brochure on your table that is, it's called Vision of North Park Brochure. And I just want to tell you a little story about how that came about. Some residents of a community in Long Beach called North Park, which is a historically African-American community, reached out to us last summer and basically said, would you come out? We have some concerns. They knew that we were concerned about the way in which communities were being served as a result of Hurricane Sandy. And as everyone knows, Long Beach, almost all of Long Beach was underwater, I guess, from Hurricane Sandy. But the community of North Park always floods. And they were hit particularly hard with Sandy. And part of the problem is because even though there are a lot of bulkheads in Long Beach, there isn't a bulkhead by this African-American community in Long Beach. So if it just rains, the water comes in. And they showed us pictures. You know, we looked and we said, oh, that must be Sandy. And they said, oh, no, that's not Sandy. That's just some other rain that we had. And ever since last summer, we have been working with them, learning from them, educating each other, and they wanted to have their voice heard. The City of Long Beach is currently updating its comprehensive plan and local waterfront revitalization plan. And they felt it was crucial that those plans reflect their needs and what they wanted to have done. And so thanks to work that we did in facilitating getting a resource to them, they now have a brochure that reflects their ideas about this plan. And I want to mention Dan Doka, who is a professor at Harvard. I met him because he reached out to us last fall, and one of his students did some great work for us on another project. And Dan was willing, under very short notice, to, Dan and a student of his, to come down, to sit with the residents of North Park, to listen to what they had to say, and then to create the brochure which you see on your table. And please pass it around so that other people can see it. As one of the residents said to us at a meeting there last week, she said, "We have never had anything like this. No one has ever come to us and asked us what we thought should be in a development plan." And I think that this effort is an example of what can happen as a result of the community organizing work that we're trying to do now. Newsot was out there knocking on doors with residents. She helped the local residents, the concerned citizens of North Park, organize the meetings where they spoke with the folks from the Harvard Graduate School. And I just wanted to share that little story. There's additional work underway in terms of faith-based outreach, and plans have been made for some focus group discussions with members of our Partnership for Racial Equity. And if you don't have the word partner on your name tag this evening, that means you haven't joined the Partnership for Racial Equity. And Newsot will be by the doors as you leave, and we'll be very happy to take down your name and let you sign up. It's a great way to be engaged with our work, whether it is something that we did earlier this year, working in coalition with others. The Suffolk County Human Rights Law was amended to now offer protection for individuals who are paying for their housing with income that is not wage-based. So they may have a legal source of income that could be a housing subsidy, it could be alimony, could be some other subsidy that is not wage-based. They cannot be discriminated against solely because of that fact. And I would just mention that because of an effort that Erase Racism spearheaded with an amendment to the Nassau law that took effect in 2007, Nassau also has protection for people who are using income that is not wage-based, legal income. So tonight, I have left, in some ways I've left the best for last. I have a very exciting announcement to make. And I'm glad that John Wenzel, a member of the Rausch Foundation Board of Directors, is here. At its board meeting yesterday, the Rausch Foundation approved a one-year, $100,000 grant to support Erase Racism's Education Equity Initiative. And I mentioned that we've had support from the Ford Foundation for a number of years now in the 6 figures. But this is the first grant that we have received from a Long Island foundation at this level. And to us, this grant represents a significant vote of confidence in the work we have been able to achieve thus far on a relatively modest budget to address education equity. Some of you may have seen A Tale of Two Schools, Race and Education on Long Island. It's a 30-minute documentary which is on our website. Please take a look if you haven't seen it. We also think it was a vote of confidence in the plans we have developed to advance this initiative and in our ability to successfully carry it forward. So let me just tell you a few things that we have done regarding education equity thus far, and to give you a little peek at what we hope to accomplish with this new initiative now. If you attended our benefit last year, or if you've read the report that we released this year, Heading in the Wrong Direction, of growing school segregation on Long Island, you know something about the terrible inequities in public school education on Long Island. For example, only 3% of Black students and 5% of Latino students attend the highest performing schools. Very tiny percentages. We conceive this initiative as a multi-year commitment to making systemic change around these kinds of structural problems. The heart of the initiative is to identify and begin to develop both short-term and long-term policy actions that can move us in a direction of structural changes for our regional schools. These changes would increase racial integration in schools so that all students, especially Black and brown students and lower income students of every background, have access to the same rigorous curriculum as a lot of white students in many schools and classrooms on Long Island. We have plenty of evidence that racially and economically segregated public schools are not equal. In fact, they are inherently unequal. And it is unconscionable to maintain the existing array of 124 school districts, which we know are consistently producing poor outcomes for far too many Black and brown students. It is unconscionable for us to stand by while witnessing increasingly more racially segregated public schools in the region and do nothing about it. And at the same time, all students are being denied the benefits of learning in schools with diverse student populations. Civil rights, democracy, and educational equity are all things that help produce a culture of inclusion and thriving, united Long Island. The activities to be launched in year one include expanding our education equity working group to include superintendents, educators, parents, and other advocates. And if you want to know more about that group, please let me know. We already have 68 members from across Long Island, and it will be very important. Any of those short-term or long-term activities that I talked about, it can't just come from Erase Racism. It needs to come from educators, from parents, from a real cross-section of people here in order for us to be successful. We will be producing and disseminating research on Long Island's racially segregated and fragmented public school system, raising consciousness through education equity forums, developing and implementing the local and statewide actions to create racially integrated classrooms. In essence, we're talking about an organized collective which will both voice the concerns and some of the solutions to the problems identified, and then go about the advocacy and the organizing to make it happen. So the first task that we will need to do, and it's a wonderful task, is to be able to hire a full-time staff person to head up this initiative. And when I said before that we'd been moving along on a shoestring, it's kind of like pulling off a big fundraising event like this when you have 4 staff people who have other jobs. It's very difficult to push such an ambitious agenda without staff. And so that is certainly on my list for tomorrow, is to work to make that happen. If I had more time, there are so many more things I would share with you about our work. but I urge you to keep in touch, not just at the annual benefits, but to, if you're not on our mailing list, to make sure you get on it. We love to get phone calls. Feel free to call me. And I certainly hope that you will come back here again and celebrate with us. It's a great party. This is not a signal that you have to leave. We're not closed. We are going to close, however, in 10 minutes. So take this opportunity to go out and put in a bid at the silent auction. Thank you so much, and Christina will just say a few words of goodbye.
Okay, so I have a last few things to just share with you. Of course, we're excited about our news about education equity. As a parent who has who has a child who's going to high school next year, oh my goodness, right? Everybody just do the little cringe with me. Again, when you think about educational inequality, I think that's something we can all get on board with. And I like to quote my Shiro, the first Latina Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who said, until we get equality in education, we won't have an equal society, right? So on behalf of the board, I would like to ask one last request, and that is, if you would like to immediately support us with a contribution to this effort, because you heard this is a one-year grant, and we are so grateful to Rouch. But as you know, we've been doing this work for many years, and it takes a sustained effort. So there is an envelope on your table, and you can make a considerate, contribution now, but it is ready to mail if you'd like to make an additional contribution to support this initiative specifically, because we'd like to make sure this is a sustained effort. So please think about supporting the work that Elaine described in her remarks. It's really important to us as an organization, and it would not be possible without the income you provide to us and the income from this reception and all of our supporters. So thank you so much. And as you're leaving, there's a bag on the table. You can actually leave your contribution right now if you have a checkbook. I don't know how many of you still carry checkbooks. Go for it. Okay. But I am personally grateful, and I know on behalf of the entire board, we are extremely grateful for your presence tonight, for celebrating with us. I'm going to wrap it up quickly, but enjoy the rest of your dessert. Have something else to drink. Please take a look at that silent auction. And again, thank you so much. This is a culminating event for the year, and this is a way for us to be celebrating and happy about all of this work that sometimes feels like it's, like I said, walking uphill. So we really appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and please get home safely after you still connect with everyone here.